Hello everyone and welcome to our next history lesson.
Ew, history.
So today we're going to be taking a look at the achievements of the ancient Egyptians and answering the question, well, what did the ancient Egyptians achieve? So to understand that, first of all, we need to know what the word achievement actually means. So have a little think. What does achievement mean? Where have you heard that word before? Well, the word achievement generally means something that's happened first or something that you were able to do that you weren't able to do before. So an achievement for us in the modern era today might be overcoming the coronavirus and finding a cure for it, or it might be sending a robot or a person to a different planet. Those are pretty strong achievements, but I don't think the ancient Egyptians managed to send anybody to a different planet. So we need to think about what they did achieve. What were their achievements? They had lots and lots and lots of them. But also we need to be thinking about, did those achievements have any impact on today? So I've got a little clip to show you about some of their achievements, and then we'll take a look at them in detail afterwards.
The ancient Egyptians were known for being innovative in their architecture, technology, and medicine. They invented things that are even used in modern days. One of the most notable things the ancient Egyptians developed was their own written language. They wrote in a series of pictures that explained stories and ideas. These pictures are called hieroglyphics. Archaeologists have been able to learn a lot about ancient Egyptian life through reading hieroglyphics. Because they had a written language, they needed something to write it on. The Egyptians are one of the first civilizations to use paper. They would make paper out of the inside of the papyrus plant. The Egyptians were known for being highly advanced in medicine. They invented their own medical tools. Through reading hieroglyphics, archaeologists have learned that they used knives, hooks, drills, forceps, scales, spoons, and saws. The medical doctors in ancient Egypt were able to perform small surgeries with these tools. They developed the yoke saddle for their chariot horses, which they later used for military purposes. They also were good at building ships and understood how to construct a sail. Ancient Egyptians also developed the first ideas on astronomy. They used the stars as a way to map religious ceremonies and festivals. If you think of Egypt, you probably think of huge pyramids. Those pyramids are around 3,000 years old. Pharaohs or kings of Egypt would have pyramids built so that when they died, they could have the pyramid as a tomb for their bodies. They would be buried with many riches, but sadly, before archaeologists could study the pyramids, tomb robbers broke in and stole the pharaoh's treasures. It has always impressed archaeologists that the pyramids were built so well. Each block is 2.5 tons, and the workers didn't have machinery like we do today to be able to put each stone in place. And each block was so precisely cut that you can't even put the tip of a knife between them. The pyramids show us what talented architects the ancient Egyptians were. Another recognizable monument in Egypt is the Great Sphinx. It's a giant statue that has the body of the lion and the head of a man. It's 66 feet tall. It's said that it was meant to guard the pyramids. Archaeologists believe that it was once painted bright colors, but over time, the paint has faded. You can still see a little bit of it on one of the ears.
So the first one, buildings. Well, they built amazing structures like the pyramids without modern technology. They were able to build these huge pyramids that contained millions and millions of bricks that was made of stone, super heavy, and they were able to do all of this without cranes and bulldozers and all that kind of modern technology that we just get used to nowadays. And to be able to do that with the precision engineering that they did, that's absolutely incredible. And funny enough, they're still around today. We can still see them. They've still existed today. They became one of the wonders of the ancient world, the pyramids. So that obviously meant something to them at the time. Paper, these were one of the first civilizations to make paper to write on, and that shouldn't be understated either, because not very many civilizations around the world created their own form of paper. Now, it wasn't paper like we have today, it was made from the papyrus plant, so it was slightly different, but it became one of Egypt's biggest exports. That means one of the things that they traded with the Mediterranean. People from all over the world were buying Egyptian papyrus paper, which meant that Egypt was becoming much more powerful and gaining lots and lots of money from it, because people figured out, you know what, it's a lot easier to write on this paper stuff than it is to carve into a stone or a piece of wood. And funny enough, we still write on paper today. Maths. They developed a system of maths that helped them measure accurately, and that's really important when it comes to things like buildings, because they could measure things that they wanted to measure. They could measure the bricks, they could see how many bricks they might need, and they could make things all precise and what have you. And it would also help them with their counting, which we're going to come on to later. Medicine. They knew to keep healthy, and they learnt lots about the body from dissecting dead bodies. That means cutting up dead bodies when it came to things like mummification. So they were able to figure out which kind of organs were linked to each other, the places, the shapes, the sizes, the colours, and all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of the knowledge that we have about medicine today started in places like ancient Egypt, and it was carried on in places like early Islam. Okay, so we learned a lot from them, so we can still see that impact today. And they were also some of the first to come up with their own surgical tools. So that means things like knives and scalpels, various different tools that helped them cut open those dead bodies and perform surgeries. Calendar. The Egyptians actually invented a 365-day calendar system based on when the Nile flooded, which gave them the seasons. Now this is really, really important because not every civilization A came up with their own calendar and B came up with an accurate calendar. Some of them were a few days out, some of them were massively out, but the Egyptians figured out that the year lasts roughly about 365 days, and funnily enough, we still have that system today, although it's a little bit more accurate now. But they also figured out when the Nile flooded, the river Nile flooded, which helped them with their crops and growing things, which we'll come on to in a minute. So that's an incredible achievement. Writing. The Egyptians were one of the first civilizations to have a form of writing called hieroglyphics, and this allowed them to communicate with each other much, much easier. Now, a lot of early civilizations came up with their own language and their own form of writing, but we haven't been able to decode every single form of writing from the ancient world. We have been able to do that with the Egyptians, and actually you've seen something that helped that. In the second lesson, in the 3D models, there was a stone that had writing on it, and that's a very famous stone called the Rosetta Stone. And on that, there were 3 different languages. There was Egyptian, and there was Greek, and there was another language as well. And researchers, historians, scientists, they've been able to figure out what the Egyptian language was by decoding the Greek, because we knew what that was, and the message was exactly the same in each of those 3 languages. Farming. Now, farming shouldn't be underestimated as an achievement, because when we think about Egypt, we know that Egypt is a very hot, dry, dusty country. It isn't full of lush green fields. So they had to be really clever with how they farmed, and they used the Nile to really good effect. Okay, which meant that they, through their calendar system, they knew when it was going to flood, which would leave behind nice rich soil to plant their crops in. Okay. Language. They created a language that they could understand and communicate with. Now, most civilizations came up with a language, but the Egyptian one was really, really important, and it's something that we can still understand today. So that's a pretty big achievement, that they came up with their own language and they were able to understand it as well. And finally, mummification. They knew how to preserve bodies so that they didn't decay quickly. Now, preserve literally just means to make it last longer. So when you put something in the fridge or the freezer, you are making that food last that little bit longer so you can eat it at a later date. Now, we're not saying that the Egyptians went and ate the mummies, but you get the idea. But it also means that we know more about them today because those bodies haven't decayed as quickly and they've stayed in better condition than just kind of being thrown into the ground. But it also meant that they got to know the insides of the body and what was connected. So here's what we want you to do. You're going to have a go at something called the Diamond 9, which looks like this. We've got those 9 achievements that we've just looked at, and we've placed them into the shape of a diamond. And what we do with this then is the most significant achievement we place at the top, and what we think is the least significant achievement we place at the bottom. Now, what I love about this activity is the fact that there are no right or wrong answers. This is what you think, but you've got to be able to justify what you think and the order that you put them in. So if we have a look at this example here, we've got farming up at the top, because I think that farming was a really, really significant achievement for the ancient Egyptians, because it wasn't easy for them. But things start to get a little bit complicated, because actually they all kind of mould into each other, because for them to do the farming really well, they needed to use the Nile, the river Nile, to help them. But for that, they needed to know when it was going to flood. So for that, they needed the calendar. But they only knew when that was going to happen, because the calendar was based on 365 days, which is numbers, which means that they needed maths to do that, to help them measure things accurately. But for maths, they're going to have to communicate that with each other so they know who's doing what. So they're going to need a language. But what if the person who knows suddenly dies and nobody's going to know what that was unless they passed it on? So funnily enough, they're going to need writing. But for writing, they're going to need to put that down on paper. They're going to need paper for that. But what if that person suddenly gets ill that knew everything? Right, well, we're going to need some medicine for that then, but we're not going to know much about medicine if we haven't done the mummification, because that's what helped us know all about the different organs and things. But people are not possibly going to get ill if they've got nice big fancy buildings to live in that keeps them safe. So you can see how this all gets a little bit messy. Now, it doesn't matter what you put at the top or the bottom so long as you can justify it. Okay, so what we'd like you to do as well is when you've put your achievements in order, we'd like you to write just a couple of sentences about the more significant. I think that farming was the most important achievement for the ancient Egyptians because the population needs food. Without food, people would go hungry and be angry. And we want the least significant as well. I think that mummification is the least important achievement because you don't need to be preserved when you're dead. There are other ways to find out about the Egyptians, like through their buildings. So have a go at this. I guarantee if you get your family involved that everybody will come up with a slightly different order, and your job is to try and convince people that your order makes more sense, and they've got to try and convince you to change your order. Okay, so make sure that you send examples to your teachers of the work that you've done, and hopefully we'll see you for the next lesson.